Chosen ones, if you skip this, you'll regret it. Stop right now. Not casually, not halfway, not while your attention drifts somewhere else. Pause everything and give this moment your full awareness. This is not just another message passing by your screen. You did not land here by coincidence, and this feeling stirring within you is not random emotion. There is intention behind this encounter. There is timing behind your presence here, and deep within your spirit, you can already sense that something about this moment is different. Something is pressing gently, yet urgently on your heart, asking you not to scroll past, not to delay, not to dismiss what you feel. Because this is not noise. This is alignment. This is a moment that has been positioned with precision, and it carries more weight than you may realize right now. Something significant has touched the heart of God, and in His wisdom, He has chosen to let you feel it. Not to overwhelm you, but to awaken you.
Not to pressure you, but to invite you into something that matters. What you are hearing right now is not just information. It carries purpose. It carries responsibility. And yes, it carries consequence. Because when God draws your attention like this, it is never without reason. He is not only speaking, He is entrusting. He is not only revealing, He is inviting you to respond. And at the center of this moment is a simple but powerful truth. You are being called to help someone. Not later, not when it feels convenient or fully clear, but now, in this very moment of awareness. And now that you have paused, now that your attention is no longer scattered, you need to understand the weight of what is unfolding in this moment. This is not a general message meant for everyone in a vague, distant way. This is precise. This is intentional. God is not speaking into a crowd right now. He is speaking directly into your awareness, drawing your focus towards something and someone specific. There is a woman whose life is, in ways you may not yet fully see, divinely connected to yours. This connection is not built on coincidence, proximity, or convenience. It was formed with purpose, long before this moment ever arrived. And whether you have already met her, are about to cross paths with her, or have recently felt a subtle pull towards someone you cannot quite explain, the truth remains the same. This is not random. This is divine alignment. You are being called to help her. Not in theory, not someday, not when every detail becomes comfortable and clear. You are being called now. And the urgency you feel is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to position you. Because there are moments in life when timing is not flexible. There are windows that open with intention, and while God remains sovereign beyond time, He also works within it. This is one of those moments where delay does not just postpone action. It can alter outcomes, not because God loses control, but because He invites participation. And participation requires response. The call is not arriving when it is easy. It is arriving when it matters. And that distinction is everything. You may find yourself questioning it, trying to reason through it, wondering if you are misreading the feeling or overthinking the impression. But what you are sensing is not confusion. It is resistance meeting clarity. Deep down, there is a quiet knowing, a recognition that something about this is real, even if it is not yet fully understood. And that is where obedience begins, not in complete understanding, but in trust. Because obedience is not just an action, it is a bridge. It is the space where what God is initiating meets what you are willing to do. And when that bridge is crossed, things begin to move in ways that logic alone cannot produce. Breakthroughs that seemed delayed begin to shift. Protection that was unseen begins to activate. Outcomes that felt uncertain begin to align. Not because you forced them, but because you responded. There are situations unfolding right now that you cannot fully see. There are pressures, battles and silent struggles that this woman may be carrying, things she may not even have the words to express. And yet, in the middle of it, God has already been working. He has already been preparing provision, positioning help, arranging support, and somehow, in His wisdom, your presence has been woven into that plan. Not as an afterthought, but as a key part of the response. This is why obedience matters so deeply in moments like this, because what may feel small to you, a message, a gesture, a moment of attention, a decision to show up, can become the very thing that shifts the direction of someone else's life. It can be the difference between isolation and connection, between confusion and clarity, between vulnerability and protection. And often, you will not see the full impact immediately. You may not even realize how significant your response was. But heaven measures differently. Heaven sees the weight of obedience, even when the world does not. And this is why the call is coming to you now, not later. Because later often feels safer. Later gives the illusion of control, of preparation, of certainty. But many of the most meaningful moments in life do not wait for perfect readiness. They arrive in real time, asking for real trust. And this is one of those moments. You are not being asked to have all the answers. You are not being asked to understand every detail or predict every outcome. You are being asked to respond, to move in alignment with what you feel, even if it stretches you, even if it interrupts your plans, even if it requires you to step beyond what feels comfortable. Because on the other side of that obedience is not just action, it is impact. And more than that, it is connection. A connection that heaven has already acknowledged, even if you are still becoming aware of it. You may wonder why you would be placed in this position, why you would be the one to carry this awareness, this responsibility. And the answer is not found in perfection or qualification. It is found in availability. God does not always choose the most prepared. He often chooses the most willing, the ones who will listen, the ones who will pause, the ones who will not ignore the quiet prompting when it comes. And right now, that is you. You are here. You are aware. You are feeling something that cannot easily be dismissed. And that alone matters more than you think, because awareness is often the first step of assignment. It is how God draws your attention before He invites your action. And once that awareness is received, a decision follows. Not forced, not pressured, but real. Will you respond, or will you retreat into comfort? Will you trust what you feel, or will you explain it away? These are the moments that shape more than outcomes. They shape direction. Because obedience does not just affect what happens around you. It shapes what happens within you. It strengthens your ability to recognize God's voice. It deepens your sensitivity to what truly matters. It builds a kind of faith that is not dependent on certainty, but anchored in trust. And over time, these moments form a pattern of alignment that begins to open doors you did not even know existed. But it starts here. It starts with one response, one decision not to ignore what you feel, one willingness to move, even if the path is not fully visible. You may not understand who she is yet. You may not know how this connection will unfold, or what role you will play in her story. But heaven does. And that is enough, because understanding is not a prerequisite for obedience. Trust is. And right now, you are standing at the edge of a moment that carries more meaning than it appears on the surface. This is not just about helping someone. It is about stepping into alignment with something that has already been set in motion. It is about recognizing that your presence, your awareness, your willingness to respond, these are not small things. They are part of something intentional, something timely, something that, if embraced, can become a bridge not only for her breakthrough, her protection, her survival, but for yours as well. You need to release the idea completely and without hesitation that this is random, because the moment you label something as random, you disconnect it from meaning. And when meaning is lost, responsibility fades with it. But this is not one of those moments you can casually dismiss. God does not operate in accidents, and He does not weave lives together without intention. Every encounter that carries spiritual weight is designed with precision, even when it feels ordinary on the surface. What you are experiencing right now is not chance alignment. It is divine orchestration. There are threads being pulled together that you cannot see, timelines intersecting that were set long before you became aware of them, and within that intersection is purpose that extends beyond convenience or comfort. God never forms connections without reason. When He allows one life to come into the awareness of another, it is because there is something in that exchange that matters, something that cannot be fulfilled in isolation. You carry something, not just skills or words or presence, but something deeper: insight, strength, perspective, timing, even compassion, shaped through your own experiences. And she carries something too, something that may not be visible yet, something that may even be hidden beneath struggle or silence. But it is there. And in the wisdom of God, those two realities are not separate. They are meant to meet. This is what mutual destiny looks like. It is not always dramatic. It is not always obvious. But it is always intentional. What you carry can unlock something in her that has been waiting for the right moment, the right voice, the right connection to emerge. And what she carries, whether it is a lesson, a redirection, a confirmation, or even a challenge, has the capacity to unlock something in you that you could not reach alone. This is why the connection matters. This is why the timing matters. Because destiny is not always revealed in isolation. Sometimes it is revealed in exchange, in conversation, in presence, in the willingness to step towards someone when it would be easier to stay distant. And yet, this is where many people miss it. Because when the moment arrives, it rarely announces itself as destiny. It often appears as inconvenience, as interruption, as something that does not fit neatly into your plans or expectations. And if you're not careful, you will mislabel the very thing that was meant to elevate you. You will see interruption where heaven sees assignment. You will see disruption where God has placed opportunity. And in doing so, you risk walking past something that was never meant to be ignored. This is why your perspective must shift. This woman is not entering your awareness to distract you. She is entering your awareness because she is part of something that has already been prepared. She is not an obstacle in your path. She is part of the path. She is not taking you away from purpose. She is connected to it. And the sooner you stop resisting that idea, the clearer everything else will begin to feel. Because once you recognize that this is assignment, not interruption, your posture changes. You become more attentive, more willing, more open to what is actually being asked of you. And in that openness, something powerful begins to activate: compassion. Not surface-level sympathy, not passive concern, but real, active compassion that moves you beyond observation into participation. And this is where a deeper truth begins to unfold. Prayer is powerful. It aligns you with God. It invites His presence. It opens the door for His will to move. But there are moments when prayer is meant to lead into action. Moments when what you pray about, you are also invited to participate in. Because God, in His design, often chooses to move through people, not just around them. He places His care in human hands, His encouragement in human words, His provision in human decisions.
And compassion is the catalyst that releases that movement. It is what transforms a thought into a step, a feeling into a response, a moment into impact. There are doors that remain closed not because God is unwilling, but because the bridge of human response has not yet been crossed.
And compassion is what builds that bridge. It is what carries you from awareness into action, from knowing to doing, from feeling to responding. And when that happens, when compassion is activated, things begin to shift in ways that cannot be explained by effort alone. Situations begin to move, burdens begin to lift, clarity begins to emerge. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because alignment has been established. Because what heaven intended is now being met with human willingness. And that is where breakthrough lives. Not just in prayer, but in the partnership between prayer and obedience. This is why you cannot afford to stay passive in this moment. This is why you cannot reduce what you feel to something optional or secondary. Because what is being presented to you is not just an opportunity to observe. It is an invitation to participate in something that carries weight beyond what you can currently measure. There are outcomes connected to this that you may never fully see, but that does not make them any less real. There are shifts that can begin with something as simple as your willingness to show up, to reach out, to respond. And while it may feel small, while it may seem like just one moment among many, heaven does not measure it that way. Heaven sees the alignment. Heaven sees the connection. Heaven sees the willingness behind the action. And that is what gives it significance. So do not dismiss this. Do not explain it away. Do not allow comfort or hesitation to convince you that this is less important than it feels. Because the truth is, it is more important than it looks. This is not random. This is not accidental. This is not something that just happened to cross your path without reason. This is intentional. This is connected. This is part of something that has been unfolding long before you became aware of it. And right now, you are being given the chance to step into that unfolding, not as a spectator, but as a participant. Not as someone who watches from a distance, but as someone who moves with purpose. And in that movement, in that response, in that willingness to let compassion lead you into action, you may begin to realize something profound. That what you thought was just a moment is actually a doorway. A doorway into impact. A doorway into alignment. A doorway into a deeper understanding of how God works, not just around you, but through you. And as you begin to understand that this moment is not random, something even deeper needs to settle within you. Because the way God chooses to move will challenge the way you expect things to happen. It is easy to assume that if something truly matters, God will handle it directly, instantly, and without involving anyone else. After all, He has the power to shift circumstances with a single word, to change outcomes without delay, to intervene in ways no human effort could ever replicate. And that is true. He is fully able. There is no limitation in Him, no lack of authority, no situation beyond His reach. But what you are witnessing right now is not a display of limitation. It is a display of design. Because again and again, throughout every season and every story, God reveals a pattern that is both humbling and profound. He chooses partnership. Not because He needs help, but because He values relationship. Not because He cannot act alone, but because He desires to move through people, to involve them, to trust them with pieces of what He is doing. And this is where everything begins to shift in your understanding. Because if you are waiting for God to move only in ways that exclude you, you may miss the very ways He is already moving through you. God often places His answers inside human obedience. He places His comfort in someone's words, His provision in someone's hands, His timing in someone's willingness to show up. What looks like an ordinary interaction on the surface can carry the weight of divine intention underneath. A conversation can become clarity. A simple act can become protection. A moment of presence can become the turning point in someone's story. And yet, from the outside, it rarely looks extraordinary. It rarely announces itself as a miracle. It looks like a person responding. It looks like someone choosing to care, choosing to move, choosing to listen. But heaven sees it differently. Heaven recognizes it as alignment, God's intention meeting human obedience. This is why your role matters more than you may feel comfortable admitting. Because when God draws your attention towards someone, He is not only showing you something, He is inviting you into something. He is extending trust. He is placing a piece of His intention into your awareness and allowing you to decide what happens next. And that decision carries weight, not because everything depends on you, but because you are part of the process He has chosen. This is what partnership looks like. It is not pressure, it is participation. It is not about carrying the outcome, it is about responding to the invitation. And this is where a key identity shift must happen within you, because many people disqualify themselves before they ever take a step. They assume that if God were truly calling someone, it would be someone more prepared, more confident, more certain. They look at their own hesitation, their own questions, their own sense of incompleteness, and they conclude that they must not be the right person. But that is not how God chooses. He does not begin with perfection. He begins with availability. He looks for the one who will pause, the one who will listen, the one who will not immediately turn away when something deeper is being stirred. And right now, that is you. Not because you have everything figured out, but because you are here, present in this moment, aware of what is being placed in front of you. That awareness is not small. It is the starting point of obedience. And obedience is where everything begins to change. Because obedience is not just an action you take, it is a doorway. It is the place where what God intends crosses into what becomes real in the natural world. Without that doorway, intention remains unseen. With it, intention becomes movement. This is why so many miracles throughout history did not begin with dramatic displays, but with simple acts of obedience. Someone listened. Someone moved. Someone responded when it would have been easier to stay still. And in that response, something opened. Something shifted. Something that could not have been forced into existence suddenly became possible, not because the person was extraordinary, but because they were willing. And that same principle is present here, in this moment. What stands in front of you is not just a decision. It is a doorway. A doorway into something that may not look significant at first, but carries the potential to become far more than you expect. And the only thing that determines whether that doorway opens is not your perfection, not your certainty, not your ability to predict the outcome. It is your willingness to step through it. This is why hesitation can feel so heavy in moments like this, because deep down, something within you recognizes that this is not just about a single action. It is about alignment. It is about stepping into the way God is choosing to move right now. And while you may not see the full picture, you do not need to, because God does not ask you to carry the entire plan. He asks you to carry your part. He does not expect you to produce the miracle. He invites you to participate in the moment where the miracle begins. And that participation often looks simple. It looks like showing up. It looks like reaching out. It looks like choosing to act when it would be easier to delay. But simplicity does not mean insignificance. In fact, it is often the opposite. Because the more natural something appears, the easier it is to overlook the spiritual weight behind it. And this is why you must become aware of how God moves, not only in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary. Not only in what is loud and undeniable, but in what is quiet and easily dismissed. Because if you are only looking for the dramatic, you may miss the divine. And right now, the divine is not arriving in a way that demands attention from everyone. It is arriving in a way that invites a response from you. This is your moment to recognize that you are not just observing something unfold. You are part of how it unfolds. You are not just hearing a message. You are being entrusted with a role. And that role is not based on your readiness. It is based on your availability. You are chosen because you are here. You are chosen because you are aware. You are chosen because in this moment, you have the opportunity to respond. And that response, as simple as it may seem, is the key that unlocks what comes next. Because obedience is not the end of the process, it is the beginning. It is the moment where what has been prepared in the unseen begins to take form in the seen. It is where possibility becomes movement, where intention becomes reality. And when you step into that, when you allow yourself to respond instead of retreat, you may begin to see something you did not expect. That what looked like a small step was actually the doorway to something much greater. Not because of what you did, but because of what God was able to do through your willingness to do it. And as this understanding continues to deepen within you, there is a truth you must allow yourself to fully receive, even if it feels unexpected, even if it stretches the way you see yourself, because it carries a weight that can transform how you respond in this very moment. Somewhere, right now, someone has been praying, and you are part of the answer to that prayer. Not symbolically, not abstractly, but in a real and present way. There are words that have been spoken in private, tears that have fallen in silence, thoughts that have never been voiced out loud but have still reached heaven with clarity. And in response, God has not only heard, He has begun to move. But His movement, as you are beginning to see, does not always arrive with visible signs or dramatic interruption. It does not always shake the ground or announce itself in a way that removes all doubt. More often than not, heaven moves quietly, precisely, and intentionally, aligning people, positioning moments, and guiding awareness in ways that can easily be overlooked if you are only expecting something loud. And this is where your awareness becomes so important, because what you are experiencing right now is part of that quiet movement. You are not being asked to imagine something. You are being invited to recognize something that is already unfolding. God is responding to a need, and He is choosing to do it through a person, through presence, through willingness, through someone who is paying attention. And that someone, in this moment, is you. This is why the idea that you are just watching or just listening cannot remain, because you are not standing outside of this moment. You are standing inside it. You are not observing a story. You are being written into it. And the role you carry is not passive, it is active. It is responsive. It is meaningful in ways that go beyond what you can currently measure. This is what it means to be a co-worker with God. Not in the sense of sharing authority or control, but in the sense of participating in what He is already doing. It is an invitation into alignment, where your actions, your choices, your responses begin to reflect something greater than your own intention. It is where your willingness becomes a channel through which something beyond you can move. And while that may sound significant, even overwhelming, it is important to understand that it does not begin with complexity. It begins with awareness, with the simple but powerful realization that your presence in this moment is not accidental, and that what you do next matters. Because when you begin to see yourself as someone who can be used in this way, something shifts internally. You move from hesitation into purpose, from questioning into clarity, from distance into engagement. And that shift is not about becoming someone else. It is about recognizing who you are already being invited to be. Someone who responds, someone who listens, someone who does not ignore the quiet prompting when it comes. And in that response, something powerful is released. Because when heaven finds a willing heart, movement follows. Not always in ways that are immediately visible, not always in ways that can be easily explained, but movement nonetheless. Situations begin to align. Opportunities begin to open. Strength appears where there was uncertainty. And often the person who responds does not even realize the full extent of what has been set in motion. You may not see the entire outcome of your obedience. You may not witness every layer of impact that unfolds from your decision to act, but that does not diminish its significance. In fact, it often means that what you are part of is bigger than what can be seen in a single moment. This is why you must not reduce this to something optional. This is why you must not treat this as something you can casually acknowledge and then move past. Because this moment is not asking for observation. It is asking for participation. It is asking you to step into alignment with something that is already in motion. To recognize that your role is not to stand at a distance and analyze, but to move with intention and trust. And trust is essential here, because you may not feel fully prepared. You may not feel certain about what to do or how it will unfold. But certainty is not the requirement. Responsiveness is. God does not wait for you to have complete understanding before He invites you to act. He begins with what you are willing to do, right where you are, with what you already have. And as you respond, clarity follows. As you move, direction becomes clearer. As you engage, understanding deepens. This is the pattern of how heaven often works. Not revealing everything at once, but guiding step by step, response by response. And each step you take in alignment strengthens your ability to recognize the next. This is why this moment is so important, because it is not isolated. It is connected. It is part of a larger unfolding that you are being invited into. And how you respond now will influence how you recognize and respond to what comes next. Because when you begin to see that you can be part of the answer, that your presence, your action, your willingness can carry impact beyond what you can measure, you begin to live differently. You become more attentive, more open, more aware of the subtle ways God is guiding you. And in that awareness, you begin to see that life is not just a series of random events, but a series of opportunities to align with something greater. This is not about pressure. It is about purpose. It is about understanding that your life has significance, not only in what you achieve for yourself, but in how you respond to what is placed in front of you. And right now, something has been placed in front of you. A moment, a connection, a prompting that you cannot easily ignore. And within it is the opportunity to be part of something meaningful, to be part of an answer that someone else has been waiting for, even if they do not know your name, even if you have not yet crossed paths in a clear and obvious way. Because heaven does not require visibility to establish connection. It requires alignment. And alignment begins with a single decision: to respond, to move, to trust that what you feel is not without purpose. And as you do, you may begin to realize that what once felt like a small moment is actually something far more significant, not because it demanded attention, but because it carried intention. And that intention, now placed within your awareness, is waiting for your response. And now, as this moment continues to unfold, there is a subtle but essential truth you must fully embrace if you are going to respond with clarity instead of hesitation. And it is this: purpose rarely arrives in a way that looks impressive at first. It does not usually announce itself with certainty or recognition. It does not come labeled in a way that makes it easy to identify or impossible to ignore. In fact, more often than not, purpose enters quietly, wrapped in something that feels ordinary, inconvenient, or even interruptive to your plans. And if you are waiting for purpose to feel big before you treat it as important, you will overlook the very moments that carry the greatest weight. Because in the way God works, significance is not always revealed in appearance. It is revealed in alignment. What feels small in your hands can carry eternal impact in His plan. This is why faithfulness matters more than visibility. Visibility appeals to human validation. It wants to be seen, recognized, affirmed. But faithfulness operates in a different realm. It responds whether anyone is watching or not. It moves even when the outcome is unclear. It honors the moment, not because it guarantees applause, but because it recognizes purpose. And this is the kind of posture that opens the door to what God is doing. Because before anything becomes visible, it is first proven in the unseen. Before something becomes impactful on a larger scale, it is first carried faithfully in a smaller one. This is not just encouragement, it is a principle that repeats itself again and again. And when you begin to see it clearly, you realize that the moments you once considered insignificant were actually the very places where something greater was being formed. Consider the story of Ruth. She did not step into her future with a clear vision of what it would become. She was not chasing influence or trying to position herself for recognition. She was responding to a moment of loyalty, choosing to stay when it would have been easier to leave, choosing faithfulness when there was no visible reward attached to it. From the outside, it looked like a simple decision, one rooted in personal commitment rather than destiny. But what she could not see was that her faithfulness was aligning her with something far greater than her immediate circumstances. That quiet decision, that seemingly small act of devotion, became the pathway into a legacy that would extend far beyond her lifetime. Not because she pursued greatness, but because she honored the moment she was in. The same pattern appears in the life of David. Before he was ever recognized as a king, before his name carried any weight, he was simply a son responding to a task. He was sent to deliver food, to check on his brothers, to fulfill something that, on the surface, held no significance beyond obedience. There was no indication that this moment would lead to anything extraordinary. There was no expectation that this simple act would place him at the center of something that would define his future. And yet, it did. Because faithfulness positioned him where purpose could find him. His willingness to respond to something small placed him exactly where something greater was waiting. And this is how it often works, not through grand entrances into destiny, but through quiet steps of obedience that lead you into it without you even realizing it at first. Even in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the lesson is not built around status, recognition, or visibility. It is built around compassion, expressed in a moment when it would have been easier to walk away. Others passed by, not because they lacked awareness, but because they did not see the moment as their responsibility. They saw inconvenience where they could have seen opportunity. They saw interruption where they could have seen assignment. But the Samaritan responded differently. He allowed compassion to move him into action, even though it required time, effort, and personal cost. And in that response, something powerful was revealed, not just about the situation, but about the heart of God. Because sometimes, the clearest expression of purpose is not found in what is said, but in what is done. And what is done often begins with a willingness to respond when it would be easier not to. This is why you must be careful not to measure the importance of this moment by how it feels on the surface, because what feels like an inconvenience may actually be an invitation. What feels like an interruption may actually be alignment. And if you allow discomfort or uncertainty to define your response, you may step away from something that was meant to lead you forward. Destiny does not always present itself in ways that are easy to embrace. Sometimes it requires you to shift your perspective, to look beyond the surface, to recognize that what you are being asked to do carries meaning beyond what is immediately visible. And this is where maturity begins to form, not in knowing everything, but in responding faithfully even when you do not. Because when you begin to honor these moments, when you begin to treat what feels small as if it matters, something changes within you. Your awareness sharpens. Your sensitivity to what God is doing increases. You begin to recognize patterns that you once overlooked, and in that recognition you become more aligned, more responsive, more willing to step into what is being placed in front of you. And over time, those small steps begin to connect. They form a pathway that, when looked at from a distance, reveals something far greater than any single moment could explain. But it all begins here, with how you respond now, with whether you choose faithfulness over visibility, with whether you honor the moment in front of you, even if it does not look like much. Because what you do in what feels small is never wasted. It is seen. It is accounted for. It is woven into something that extends beyond what you can measure. And while you may not see the full picture yet, you are being given the opportunity to step into it, one response at a time. Not by chasing something big, but by honoring something real. Not by waiting for certainty, but by moving in trust. Because in the end, it is not the size of the moment that determines its impact. It is the willingness to respond to it. And as this understanding settles deeper into your spirit, there is another shift that must take place within you. Because the way you move from this moment forward cannot be driven by the same mindset that the world often teaches. You have been conditioned, in many ways, to believe that progress comes through striving, that advancement is earned by pushing harder, proving more, reaching further, and positioning yourself in ways that gain recognition and control. Ambition, in its familiar form, tells you to chase, to compete, to secure outcomes through effort and persistence alone. And while effort has its place, what you are being invited into right now operates on a different principle entirely. In the kingdom of God, favor does not come from striving, it comes from alignment. It is not about how forcefully you move, but about how closely you move in step with what God is already doing. Because when you are aligned, things begin to open that effort alone could never unlock. Doors respond, not because you demanded them to, but because you arrived at the right place, at the right time, in the right posture. And that posture is obedience. This is why obedience carries a kind of power that ambition alone can never produce. Ambition focuses on outcomes you can see. Obedience responds to direction you can feel. Ambition tries to control the future. Obedience trusts the one who already holds it. And when you begin to shift from one to the other, something profound begins to happen in the way your life unfolds. You stop exhausting yourself trying to force movement in areas that are not aligned. And instead, you begin to step into moments where movement is already prepared. This is what it means to walk in favor. It is not random blessing. It is the result of alignment. And alignment often reveals itself in moments like this. Moments that do not look like opportunity in the traditional sense. Moments that do not immediately promise advancement or recognition, but carry a quiet invitation to respond. Helping the right person at the right time is one of the most overlooked ways that alignment manifests. Because from the outside, it can look insignificant.
It can feel like a detour, like something that pulls you away from your own goals, your own plans, your own sense of direction. But what you cannot see in that moment is what is being unlocked beneath the surface. There are doors that are not opened by effort, but by connection. There are pathways that are not discovered through planning, but through obedience. And when you respond to the right moment, when you step into the right connection, something begins to shift, not just in their life, but in yours. Opportunities begin to emerge that you did not chase. Favor begins to follow in ways you did not manufacture. And suddenly, what once felt like a small, isolated act reveals itself as a turning point. This is why you must not underestimate what feels small. Because in the spiritual realm, scale is not measured the same way it is in the natural. What appears minor, quiet, or unnoticed can carry immense weight. A single act of obedience can set into motion a chain of events that reaches far beyond what you can trace. A simple decision to respond can align you with something that alters the trajectory of your life in ways you could never have planned. And yet, because it does not look dramatic at the beginning, it is easy to dismiss. It is easy to delay. It is easy to convince yourself that it does not matter enough to act on. But this is where discernment becomes essential, because what feels small is not always small. Sometimes it is concentrated significance, purpose compressed into a moment that requires your willingness to recognize it. And when you do, when you respond instead of hesitating, you step into something that begins to unfold beyond your expectations. This is how obedience leads you into your next season, not through a single obvious leap, but through a series of aligned responses that gradually position you where you are meant to be. You may not even realize it at first. It may feel like you are simply doing what is in front of you, simply responding to what you sense, simply honoring the moment without fully understanding where it is leading. But over time, as those moments connect, a pattern emerges. You begin to see that you have been guided, step by step, into a place you could not have reached through striving alone. And this is the difference between ambition and obedience. Ambition tries to construct a path based on what you can see. Obedience walks a path that is revealed as you move. Ambition seeks control. Obedience requires trust. And while trust can feel uncertain in the moment, it produces a kind of stability that effort alone cannot sustain. Because when you are aligned, you are not carrying the weight of the outcome. You are participating in a process that is already being guided. This is why there is a certain grace that accompanies obedience. Things may still require effort, but they do not feel forced. Movement may still require courage, but it does not feel chaotic. There is a sense of rightness, even when there is uncertainty. A quiet assurance that, despite not knowing every detail, you are where you are meant to be. And that assurance becomes the foundation for everything that follows. So when you feel the pull to help, when you sense that this moment is asking something of you, do not measure it against what you think you should be doing or where you think you should be going. Do not allow ambition to convince you that only the visible, the impressive, or the strategically beneficial moments are worth your attention, because some of the most significant shifts in your life will not come from what you planned, but from what you responded to. They will come from moments like this, moments where you chose alignment over striving, obedience over control, trust over certainty. And in that choice, something opens. Something begins to move. Not because you forced it, but because you stepped into it. And what begins as a single act of obedience can become the doorway into a season you have been unknowingly preparing for all along. And as you stand in this moment of awareness, feeling both the weight and the invitation of what is unfolding, there is something you must understand clearly, so that you do not misinterpret what you feel.
The urgency pressing on your spirit right now is not pressure. It is alignment. It is not fear trying to rush you into something reckless or unclear. It is not anxiety demanding that you act without thought or wisdom. It is something far more precise than that. It is the awareness that timing matters. It is the recognition that this moment carries a specific window, and that window, while real and purposeful, is not indefinite. Spiritual urgency does not come to overwhelm you. It comes to position you. It draws your attention to what matters now, not later, not eventually, not when it becomes more convenient or more comfortable. Because in the way God moves, there are moments that are anchored in timing, moments that are connected to a sequence that is already unfolding. And when those moments arrive, they carry a quiet but undeniable invitation to respond while the door is open. This is why what you feel right now has a certain intensity to it. Not because something is wrong, but because something is active. There is movement taking place, alignment being offered, and your awareness is being drawn into it. And if you misunderstand that urgency as pressure, you may resist it. You may pull back, delay, or convince yourself that you need more time to think, more clarity before you act, more certainty before you move. But what you must realize is that clarity often follows obedience, not the other way around. Waiting for complete understanding can sometimes lead to missed timing, not because God withholds, but because the sequence continues. This is why timing is not a minor detail. It is part of the design. There is a rhythm to how things unfold, a flow that connects one moment to the next. And when you move in step with that rhythm, things align with a kind of grace that cannot be manufactured. But when you hesitate, when you step out of that rhythm, it does not mean everything is lost. It simply means that movement slows. This is where a deeper understanding is needed. Because delayed obedience is not about punishment. God is not reacting with frustration or withdrawing his presence because you hesitated. He remains faithful, constant, and present regardless of your pace. But there is a principle at work here, and principles operate consistently. When you delay a response that is connected to timing, the outcomes connected to that response can also be delayed. Not because they are taken away, but because the sequence has been interrupted. It is like stepping out of a moving current. The current continues, but your position within it changes. And to re-enter that flow, there may need to be adjustment, realignment, a return to the place of responsiveness. This is why what you do now matters so much. Because you are not just responding to a feeling, you are responding within a sequence. There are things connected to this moment that extend beyond what you can currently see. There are outcomes that are time-sensitive, opportunities that are moment-specific, connections that are meant to happen within a certain window. And while God is not limited by time, he often chooses to work within it, to orchestrate moments that align with purpose in a way that reflects both his sovereignty and his intention. This is why Scripture speaks of seasons and times, not as restrictions, but as expressions of wisdom. There is a time for movement and a time for waiting, a time for speaking and a time for listening. And discernment is the ability to recognize which time you are in. Right now, this is not a moment of waiting. This is a moment of response. This is a moment where something has been brought into your awareness because it is meant to be acted on, not stored away for later consideration. And the more clearly you see that, the more naturally you will move. Because when urgency is understood correctly, it does not create anxiety. It creates clarity. It simplifies your focus. It removes unnecessary distractions. It brings you back to what matters most in this specific moment. And what matters now is not perfection. It is not having every detail mapped out or every possible outcome accounted for. What matters now is alignment. It is the willingness to move in step with what you sense God is highlighting, even if that step feels small, even if it feels uncertain, even if it requires you to trust beyond what you can currently see. Because trust is what keeps you in rhythm. It is what allows you to move without needing full control. And when you move in trust, you begin to experience something that cannot be forced, a sense of flow, a sense of being carried within something rather than striving against it. This is what happens when you honor timing. Things unfold with a kind of order, a kind of progression that feels natural, even when it is challenging. But when timing is ignored, when response is delayed beyond what the moment requires, friction begins to appear. Not because God is resisting you, but because the alignment has shifted. And that friction often shows up as confusion, missed connections, or the feeling that something is no longer as clear as it once was. This is why it is so important not to dismiss what you feel right now. Because this clarity you have, this sense of knowing that something matters, that something is being asked of you, is part of the grace of this moment. It is God making the path visible enough for you to take the next step. And that visibility is not always constant. It is often tied to response. As you move, more becomes clear. As you act, more is revealed. But if you remain still, waiting for more before you begin, you may find that the clarity you once had begins to fade, not because it was taken, but because it was meant to lead into action. So do not misinterpret this urgency. Do not label it as pressure and push it away. Recognize it for what it is, an invitation into alignment, a call to step into a moment that carries significance now. Because this window, as real as it is not open indefinitely. Moments pass, opportunities shift, sequences continue. And while God remains faithful through all of it, He is inviting you to be part of what is happening now, not just what could happen later. And in that invitation is both grace and responsibility. Grace, because you are being guided. Responsibility, because you are being asked to respond. And as you do, as you choose to move in step with what you sense rather than retreat into delay, you will begin to see something powerful unfold, not just around you, but within you. A strengthening of trust, a sharpening of discernment, a deeper awareness of how God moves and how you can move with Him. And it all begins with recognizing that this moment, right here, right now, is not one to postpone. It is one to step into. And as you begin to respond to what is being placed in front of you, there is something deeper happening beneath the surface that you must not overlook. Because this moment is not only about the impact you are making in someone else's life, it is also about the transformation taking place within you. Every assignment God places before you carries a dual purpose. There is always an outward effect, something that touches, lifts, or shifts another person's situation. But at the same time, there is an inward work unfolding, something refining, strengthening, and shaping who you are becoming. And if you only focus on the external outcome, you will miss the internal formation that gives that outcome lasting meaning. Because God is not only interested in what you do, He is deeply invested in who you are becoming through what you do. This is how growth happens in a way that is sustainable. This is how character is formed in a way that can carry the weight of what is coming next. And right now, in this moment of obedience, there are specific areas within you that are being stretched and strengthened in ways that may not be immediately visible, but are profoundly significant. One of those areas is compassion. Compassion is not something that remains static. It is not a fixed trait that you either have or do not have. It is something that expands through use. It deepens each time you choose to care beyond what is convenient. Each time you allow yourself to feel the weight of another person's situation without turning away from it. Because true compassion requires vulnerability. It asks you to move beyond self-protection, beyond indifference, beyond the instinct to remain unaffected.
And when you respond to that call, when you allow compassion to move you into action, something within you softens in the best possible way.
Your heart becomes more attuned, more responsive, more aligned with what truly matters. And that softness is not weakness. It is strength. It is the kind of strength that allows you to carry responsibility without becoming hardened, to remain open without becoming overwhelmed. This is how God prepares you to handle greater levels of influence, not by making you less sensitive, but by making you more grounded in what matters. Alongside compassion, another area being developed in you is discernment. Not every moment carries the same weight. Not every need is meant to be responded to in the same way. And part of spiritual maturity is learning to recognize the difference between distraction and assignment, between what is urgent in appearance and what is urgent in purpose. Discernment is not developed in comfort. It is refined through experience. Through moments like this where you must listen closely, where you must pay attention to what is being stirred within you, where you must choose whether to respond or withdraw. Each time you choose to respond in alignment, your ability to recognize similar moments in the future becomes sharper. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to sense the difference between random interruption and divine appointment. And over time, that awareness becomes more natural, more immediate, more reliable. This is how you grow into someone who does not just react to life, but moves with intention within it. And as compassion and discernment are being formed, something else is being strengthened at the same time: your faith. Not the kind of faith that exists only in thought or belief, but the kind that is expressed through action. Because faith deepens when it is exercised. It grows when it is stretched beyond certainty, when it requires you to move without having every answer, when it calls you to trust what you cannot fully see. And moments like this are exactly where that kind of faith is built. When you choose to respond, even with questions still present, even with outcomes still unknown, you are reinforcing something within yourself that says, "I trust beyond what I understand." And that trust becomes a foundation that allows you to stand firm even when circumstances shift, even when clarity is not immediate, even when the path ahead is still unfolding. This is why these moments matter so deeply, because they are not isolated experiences. They are building blocks. Each act of obedience adds something to your internal structure. Each response strengthens your capacity to carry what comes next. And much of this happens in ways that are hidden, unnoticed by others, uncelebrated by the world. But hidden obedience is never wasted. In fact, it is often the most important kind, because it is where integrity is formed. It is where your actions are aligned not with external validation, but with internal conviction. And that alignment is what prepares you for future responsibility. Because responsibility requires more than ability. It requires character. It requires consistency. It requires the ability to remain steady even when the external environment changes. And that kind of stability is not developed in visible moments of success. It is developed in quiet moments of obedience, like this one. This is where you learn to respond without needing recognition. This is where you learn to act without needing immediate results. This is where you learn to trust that what you are doing matters, even when it is not being seen or acknowledged. And over time, that trust becomes part of who you are. It becomes the foundation upon which greater opportunities can safely rest. Because without character, even the greatest opportunities can become overwhelming. Without internal strength, external elevation can become unsustainable. This is why God invests so deeply in your formation before expanding your influence. Because He is not just preparing a moment for you, He is preparing you for the moment. And everything you are doing right now, every step of obedience, every decision to respond, every moment where you choose alignment over comfort, is contributing to that preparation. You may not see the full picture yet. You may not understand how this connects to what is coming next. But that does not diminish its importance, because what is being built within you is what will sustain you when what is coming next arrives. Character is what holds destiny in place. It is what allows you to carry weight without collapsing under it. It is what enables you to remain grounded even when everything around you begins to expand.
And that character is not formed in theory. It is formed in practice, in real moments, in present decisions, in responses that may seem small but carry lasting impact. So as you move forward from this moment, do not think of it as something separate from your own journey. Do not see it as just helping someone else while you remain unchanged. Understand that you are being shaped through it, that something within you is being refined, strengthened, prepared, and that preparation is just as important as the outcome itself. Because in the end, what God does through you will always be connected to what He has first done within you. And this moment, right now, is part of that process. And as everything you have heard begins to settle into place, there is one final barrier that must be removed from your thinking, because it is often the very thing that prevents people from stepping fully into moments like this. And it sounds like a quiet doubt within you that says, "I am not ready for this."
It may not come loudly, it may not even fully form into words, but it lingers as hesitation, as a subtle resistance that tries to convince you that you need more time, more preparation, more certainty before you can respond in the way this moment requires. But you need to see this clearly. God does not call the ready, He prepares the willing. Readiness, as you often define it, is based on feeling complete, confident, and fully equipped before taking action. But in the way God works, readiness is revealed through obedience, not before it. He does not wait for you to become perfect before He invites you into purpose. He meets you in your willingness, and as you respond, He shapes, strengthens, and equips you along the way. This is why you cannot allow yourself to believe that you are lacking in this moment. You are not behind. You are not unqualified. You are not being asked to do something that is beyond what you are capable of carrying with God's help. Everything you need to take the next step is already within your reach, even if it does not look impressive, even if it feels small or insufficient in your own eyes. Because what you see as limited, God sees as a starting point. And when you place that starting point into His hands through obedience, something begins to multiply. This is one of the most consistent principles you will find. What you release in alignment does not remain as it is. It grows. It expands. It becomes more than what you originally offered, not because of your effort alone, but because of the partnership between your willingness and His power. You are not being asked to produce the full outcome. You are being asked to release what you have. And in that release, multiplication begins. This is why the question is not whether what you have is enough. The question is whether you are willing to use it.
Because even the smallest act of obedience, when aligned with God's timing, can become the catalyst for something far greater than you can imagine. A simple step can open a door that leads to another and another until you find yourself standing in a place you never could have reached through planning alone. This is how God works. He builds forward through response, not through perfection. And as you begin to understand this, something shifts within you. The pressure to be ready begins to fade, and in its place comes a sense of responsibility to be willing. Because willingness is what keeps you moving. It is what allows you to step forward even when you do not have all the answers. It is what keeps you aligned with what is being revealed in the moment rather than what you think should happen in the future. And that alignment is where everything begins to unfold. You may not see it immediately, but what you do now is connected to things you have been praying about, things you have been waiting for, things you have been hoping would shift in your life.
Because God often answers your prayers in ways that require your participation. He does not always respond by changing your situation from a distance. He responds by inviting you into a moment that leads to change. And if you are not paying attention, if you are waiting for the answer to look the way you expected, you may miss the fact that it has already arrived in a different form. This moment may be that answer. This opportunity to respond, this call to step forward, this awareness that has been placed on your heart. It may be directly connected to what you have been asking God for. Not in an obvious or immediate way, but in a way that unfolds as you move. Because sometimes, the breakthrough you are waiting for is not on the other side of more waiting. It is on the other side of obedience. It is hidden within a step that seems unrelated at first, but reveals its connection over time. This is why you must trust the process, even when it does not make complete sense. Because God is not only responding to your current situation, He is aligning you with your future. He is placing you in positions, creating connections, and opening pathways that will make sense later, even if they feel unclear now. And your willingness to respond in this moment is what allows that alignment to continue. So do not disqualify yourself. Do not step back because you feel unprepared. Do not allow doubt to convince you that you are not enough for what is being asked of you. Because the truth is, you were never meant to carry this on your own. You were meant to respond, and in responding, to experience how God meets you in the process. Strength comes as you move. Clarity comes as you act. Provision comes as you step forward. And what begins as uncertainty can quickly become confirmation when you choose to trust instead of retreat. This is why this moment carries so much potential. Not because everything will change instantly, but because something will begin that has the power to change everything over time. A shift in direction, a new connection, an open door, a deeper level of understanding. It all starts with a single response, a decision to say yes, even if that yes feels small. Because small yeses, when aligned with God, lead to significant outcomes. They create momentum. They build trust. They open pathways that would have remained closed otherwise. And as that momentum builds, you begin to see something clearly. You were never as unprepared as you thought. You were simply waiting for the moment to begin. And that moment is here, right now. Not in the future, not when everything feels easier, not when every question is answered. Now. This is where your willingness becomes action. This is where your awareness becomes movement. This is where what you carry begins to be released. And in that release, something greater begins to form. Something that may very well be connected to everything you have been asking for, everything you have been hoping for, everything you have been preparing for without even realizing it. So step forward. Not because you feel ready, but because you are willing. And in that willingness, watch what begins to unfold. And now you are here, at the edge of a decision that may seem small on the surface, but carries a depth you cannot fully measure. And this is why you must not rush past what you have just felt. Because this moment matters more than it appears. What has been stirred within you is not sluchaine, it is intentional. And ignoring it will not silence it. It will only delay what is trying to unfold through you. There is a quiet weight in your spirit for a reason. A gentle but persistent pull that is asking you not to dismiss this, not to explain it away, not to wait until it feels more convenient. This is where response begins. Not in certainty, but in willingness. So if something within you recognizes the truth in this moment, if you feel that subtle clarity, that inner nudge you cannot quite ignore, then let your response be simple but real. Write Amen, not as a habit, but as a commitment, as a quiet yes to alignment. as a decision to move when God says move. And if someone has come to your mind during this message, do not overlook that either, because that may be part of the connection you are being called to step into. Reach out, share this with them, remind them they are not alone. And as you continue forward, do not walk away from this awareness. Stay connected to it. Stay attentive to what you feel, to what is being highlighted in your spirit. Continue this journey, not just by listening, but by living in alignment with what you receive. God is not rushing you. He is not forcing you, but He is inviting you into something meaningful, something timely, something that requires your response. Stay willing, stay open, stay aligned. Because as you respond, even in the smallest ways, something begins to move beyond what you can see. And in ways you may not immediately realize, heaven is already responding to you.